House of the Dragon time, episode 8. The sea is always right. I like using that quote, despite it not even coming from this show, because nobody in this show says anything that's quite that silly. Beware incoming spoilers. So what are the good and bad points? On the good, we have lots of scheming and politics, and it's all quite well crafted. We've also had another time skip, so the shrieking kids have grown up and gone away, and Lord is that a mercy. The costumes are still great, including the Queen's new outfit. The time skip, if anything, has helped the acting. Some of the younger acting talent maybe struggled a little, and with the time skip, they've been replaced by more seasoned performers. Also in the good list, it has the actor Will Johnson in it. I've been seeing Will Johnson on the cast list for the last few weeks and was wondering when he'd get some lines. He's too good not to use, so I've been very much looking forward to seeing him a lot more, which would have been nice, but sadly for me, on the bad side, spoiler, he gets killed by Daemon, who hits him from behind with a sword later in the episode, like a coward, while he's unarmed and doesn't even know he's about to get hit, all for telling the truth about the princess's kids being illegitimate, and it's too gory for me to even show on YouTube. I will just tell you, his head gets bisected at the mouth. All in all, this show has some very bad moral lessons in it. So in the good column we had a time skip, and in the bad column we had another time skip. So we now have some replacement actors and the kids have all grown up, and this may come as a shock, but Daemon still looks exactly the same. Is Matt Smith allergic to the makeup they use to artificially age people? Is he supposed to be immortal like the Highlander? Is there just a picture of Daemon somewhere in the Red Keep, aging on his behalf like he's Dorian Gray? Oh, to be able to cheat time like Daemon Targaryen. Hang on, is that it? Is Daemon a Time Lord? Because I can't help but notice somewhat of a similarity between these two in terms of looks, and you never see them together at the same time. Is that it? Have I cracked the code? Is House of the Dragon in canon with Doctor Who? I hope not House of the Dragon, because for all of the problems that late Game of Thrones had, you're still better than that. From my rough calculations, approximately 25 years have elapsed between episodes 1 and 7, and Daemon allegedly spent 10 years of those at war. Why does he look exactly the same? This is ridiculous! So you now have new actors for the kids, and also for Alicent's children, and the new actors look nothing like the child actors again. Aemond has grown like a weed and now has completely different facial features to when he was young. Aegon seems to have aged 6 to 7 years and shrunk in height. It was bad enough when they changed actresses for Laena Velaryon and her full and very kissable lips shrunk in the transition. And this one may have actually managed to top that. Also in the bad, they had a bad training fight sequence. I looked and I couldn't find a reference in the credits to the show having a fight choreographer. It seems to have multiple choreographers, but by the looks of things, that's all for the dance sequences. But as far as I can tell, no fight choreographer, and frankly, it'd be wise if they got one. If you have got one, you maybe need to find a new one, because sorry show, your fights are still atrocious. The fight is in the training yard, with Criston Cole fighting Prince Aemond, who seems to have turned into quite a fighter in the intervening years, or at least that's what they're trying to push. In reality, the scene is quite silly. They're using real weapons as Criston wildly swings a ball and chain at Aemond's head. It's enough to shatter a wooden shield on contact, so if it hits him in the head, he's going to die. The movement is all very basic, and it's a terrible way to train. One mistake and you're going to kill the king's second son. And neither Aemond nor Criston is wearing a helmet. Criston also, much like Daemon, hasn't aged at all. This episode all revolves around what happens at the beginning. The episode starts and we're on Driftmark again. We learn that Corlys has been away and his wife hasn't seen him for 6 years. He was injured during a naval battle. He led his men into an ambush when they went to board what they thought was an abandoned ship, but it wasn't, and a corsair slashed him across his throat. He fell into the water but survived. He's been left with a bad infection, and all this sounds very interesting. Can we see that? No? Because I have to say that sounds fascinating. Show, when you have a big naval battle, can you do it on camera, please? When you do something interesting, can you show me instead of telling me second hand that something fascinating happened off camera and I missed it? News has just got back to his wife that he's been badly wounded and may die, so they may need a new Lord of Driftmark. Corlys's brother is not happy with the current line of succession. He doesn't want the princess's youngest son Luke taking the seat because he's illegitimate. He thinks that he should inherit the land because he's the next male heir in line. Corlys's brother is played by another British actor called Will Johnson. He has bags of experience as an actor and I quite like him. I'm mostly known from a UK crime show called Waking the Dead. If you've never seen it, it's about a crime lab solving cold cases and catching murderers. The show ran for 10 years, from 2000 through to 2011, and Will Johnson was in all 92 episodes. It was somewhat unremarkable for its time, but entertainment has deteriorated so much since that if the show was released today, it would practically be a masterpiece by comparison. So maybe give it a go if you want to see a young Will Johnson and watch something that's actually half decent. It also had Tara Fitzgerald in it, and God did she used to be hot. This is her from the film Brassed Off. An elderly relative of mine used to love that film. He was ex-military and for some unknown reason he had a real thing for brass bands. Either that or that was a convenient excuse to look at Tara Fitzgerald. So Corlys's brother wants Driftmark. The king, meanwhile, is very ill, and the queen is making decisions on his behalf now. The brother thinks that the queen will back him to spite the princess and disinherit her illegitimate son in favour of him. In doing so, she'll get an ally that controls House Velaryon, and by association, controls their large navy. So that's this episode in a nutshell. A lot of bickering between the Queen and the Princess's factions about who gets to sit in a chair awkwardly fashioned from ragged driftwood. So if you like the scheming and politicking, this episode is frankly for you. And I've run out of time, so all the rest of that will have to wait for part 2. It's House of the Dragon time again, and I have some of the older episodes still to cover. And I've come to a realisation about this show, and now I've seen it, I can't unsee it. And that realisation is that I find the show very depressing now. And if that was something that I was interested in getting more of, I could just turn on the BBC. So I've been thinking about when I started to feel differently about the show, and why. Because I don't think I felt this way from the start. So bear with me for a moment. I thought about it for a while, and I think I've pinned it down. I've liked the show markedly less since the time skip between episodes 5 and 6. It's when they changed actresses for Alicent and Rhaenyra. Since that point, the show has been an endless cavalcade of tragedy and misery that just gets progressively worse. Don't get me wrong, in episodes 1 to 5 there were dark moments, but they were balanced in part by Emily Carey playing young Alicent and her portrayal of a quite sweet and dutiful young woman, and Millie Alcock playing young Rhaenyra. That was the last time anyone in the show had any fun. And even when she had fun, it was effing her own uncle. And then there was her and Sir Criston. At least it was something positive to add a bit of balance to the darkness of the show. Since that transition, there's not much in the way of love, not much in the way of friendship, no humour whatsoever. There's just nothing positive. Nobody in the show seems to like anybody else, and I'm not sure I like any of them either. The characters that were positive before episode 5 changed to be negative as well. Everyone in it seems to hate their own lives. With how bleak the story's got, it's a surprise anyone in it is still alive. In the real world, the characters will be forming a conga line to the top of a tower to throw themselves out of a window. In Game of Thrones, let's face it, Tyrion hardly had it easy. He was born with dwarfism. His sister and father hated him for the death of his mother during his birth. A lot of people hated him just because of his family name. And he had more fun than the people in House of the Dragon. He just drank a lot of wine, spent a lot of money on prostitutes to be happy, and despite all that, he still found love twice. Even Varys was more positive than the people in House of the Dragon, and he didn't manage to make it through Boyhood without getting his knackers chopped off, and he was less of a buzzkill than the Hot D crew. The guy that did it didn't even have the courtesy to leave him with a penis, and even he had a sunnier disposition than these miserable sods in House of the Dragon. I'm trying to do a retrospective of the show Babylon 5 because I wanted to do a more positive review, and in comparison it's so much better balanced than House of the Dragon. By comparison, the visual effects in Babylon 5 are far worse. The costumes are worse, some of the acting is extremely shaky, but where Babylon 5 wins out is on story and having a far more balanced tone. Babylon 5 had moments of genuine humour, close friendships, love to balance the tragedy that was there. It's like the writers of House of the Dragon are in need of either a hug or an intervention, because since episode 5 it's all death, funerals and uncle fucking, and later a version of cockfighting with specially sharpened children. But we'll get to that, boy will we get to that. It's frankly getting to the stage where I just want some of the characters to be happy. I mean, poor Alicent. First of all, her father marries her off to a much older man who she doesn't love. She's lost her best friend, her sons are tools, then her husband is bedridden and ill. Surely no one would begrudge her finding a young man to pound a massive smile onto her face once in a while. She's the queen. Show, are you really trying to tell me that she can't find anything to make herself happy? Maybe some new shoes. That seems to work for a lot of women, but no. The best company she can apparently get is Larys and his creepy foot fetish. Anyway, back to the show, and Daemon gets some dragon eggs that one of the dragons had laid. And enjoy his creepy ass smile, because that's the closest I think that we get to someone being happy for the next 3 episodes. He goes back to Dragonstone, and the princess's kids are learning High Valyrian from Phil Daniels, who's an English actor, musician and singer playing the Maester. You may remember him singing in the 1994 song Park Life by the band Blur. Just the strangest people turn up in the casting of this show. Rhaenys sends a letter to Rhaenyra, warning what Corlys's brother will try to do, that being to remove Rhaenyra's son as the heir to Driftmark. So the Princess Rhaenyra and Matt Daemon go to King's Landing, where the succession to Driftmark will be decided. And it's all a bit premature. It'll be a bit awkward if Corlys survives after all this. He's not even dead yet, and they're arguing the will, dividing up his property, and given the chance, would probably be checking him for gold teeth. In King's Landing, the Queen is told that her eldest son has forced himself on a serving girl, and I'm finding it hard to believe that her kids have turned out like this. It's a stretch, and they haven't really sold me on it. Alicent was so sweet and dutiful. How have her kids ended up like this? So Alicent goes to see her rapist son, and he's completely unapologetic. This character doesn't make any sense. Why would he treat the princess's sons like playthings? They outrank him. Rhaenyra is heir to the throne, not Aegon. Her son is second in line, not Aegon. So Alicent pays off the girl and gives her a drink to abort the pregnancy. And dear God, show, leave it alone. You're obsessed. It's wall-to-wall abortion, pregnancy and giving birth with none of the love, passion, feeling, sex to go with it. House of the Dragon showrunners, can you just point on the doll to where the US Supreme Court decision on Roe vs Wade touched you? Rhaenyra and Daemon go to see the king, who is now depressingly bedridden, and they now have multiple children. 2 maybe it appears, and a 3rd on the way, and all that happened in another time skip off camera. Now, you have quite a good story at your core, House of the Dragon. I'd just quite like to, see some of it. Can you maybe do more of the story just for me, on camera, and ideally well lit enough for me to be able to see what's going on? But it seems that in my negative feelings about the show, I'm firmly in the minority, because many people seem to be loving this show, and I will admit, it's good to hear the Game of Thrones music again. I could tell the show was back, at least in part, when I was around someone that I know, and while they were mashing potatoes, I caught them whistling the Game of Thrones theme tune again. Now, I have quite enjoyed the show, but I do seem more critical about it than most. And it is a standout among the current crop of TV and film, but in truth, I think it just looks taller because it's standing in a crowd of midgets. If I compare it to the all-time greats, in terms of story, it's just okay. I already touched on this next part in part 1 of the review. I was ragging on this what I thought was a bad training fight scene, and I thought it'd be illustrative to show you something that I think is good in comparison. So here we have the training fight scene. Note how ponderously slow it is. How there's a cut after at most 1 or 2 attacks that breaks up any kind of fluidity in the fight scene. How the choice of weapons and clothing makes no sense for a training fight. And here we have the opening fight from the 2020 South Korean film The Swordsman. On the whole, the film is pretty good. The first half is very good, but the film deteriorates into silliness in the second half. Note the speed and precision of the choreography. The innovative use of sweeping camera shots, the constant feeling of motion. That's what I would like the fight scenes in Game of Thrones to look like. But sadly, what we do get is actors fighting like they're in heavy armour, even when they aren't. I'm also not sure how nearly getting your unprotected head smashed in with a mace is good training for a dragon rider. And this is also a problem for Sir Criston's character. Aemond has been written as being this reckless, but Criston hasn't. Him and the Queen, as they have been written, would never consent to this kind of stupidity. His core motivation is supporting the Queen against Rhaenyra at this point, so risking Aemond's life goes against Criston's core motivations, because if Aemond is hurt or killed in training, it helps Rhaenyra.
Could you make me a cup of tea, please, Stephanie?
House of the Dragon time, the show that may at this point be more grimdark than Warhammer 40k. In that, at least there are orcs being funny, so beware spoilers. And when your show's a bit of a downer, even compared to 40k, that may be a problem. And boy is it dark, like someone please get them a light bulb dark. This show has also been a bit surprising. Some of my predictions from earlier in the series didn't come true. It appears nobody was poisoning the king after all. But what is most surprising is that they never had a lesbian relationship. I would have thought that would have been a nailed on certainty. So there are probably some very annoyed lesbians at this point. But it is my experience that lesbians tend to look pissed off at the best of times. On this occasion, they may have cause, because instead the showrunners seem to have forgotten about them, but included strong representation for the foot fetish crowd, and maybe for people with a birthing fetish. Is that even a thing? If it is, I don't want to know. I'm not going to look it up, but the internet exists, so let's face it, it's going to be a thing. In a world where there are people with a Zootopia fetish, it's going to be a thing. And on the subject of things that I wish didn't exist, there was this headline and a story that seems to have genuinely run in Cosmopolitan, titled, "Now that House of the Dragon's over, I'll say it. Incest fantasies are hot." And somebody seems to have thought that that was a good idea to run. At this point, you can only find that title on the Wayback Machine now. If you're interested, that headline persevered for 2 hours and 20 minutes before it was swiftly replaced with this one. So, we're all just fine with incest in TV now. The writer, one Veronica Lopez, is the sex and relationships editor at Cosmopolitan, and her byline has also been removed from the story. Where her name was, it now just says by the editors. So I, for one, am quite curious what happened there. I'm imagining a furious backlash. Veronica Lopez at Cosmopolitan also penned a story titled Ahem, Dragon Sex is on the Rise, and you can thank House of the Dragon. Just for bookkeeping, what precise circle of hell are we on now? Anyway, this is a review, so I may have to cover this in a separate video. On doing some research, I was quite interested to learn that quite a lot of the filming for House of the Dragon happened in the UK. Matt Smith was quoted in Digital Spy as saying that he found Doctor Who harder than House of the Dragon because he was the sole lead in Doctor Who and almost all of the focus was on him, whereas in House of the Dragon it's an ensemble cast. And some of this made me laugh quite a lot. King's Landing, it seems, was allegedly filmed in a place called Placencia in Cáceres, Extremadura in Spain, and it looks quite nice. I'd be tempted to go and give it a try if it wasn't for the dragons, but when you go into the throne room in King's Landing, you're apparently transported to the far off and mystical land of Watford. Matt Smith was quoted as saying, "House of the Dragon is a huge global franchise, or so they tell me. But I just go to work in a studio in Watford and try to get the lines in the right order." As well as that, when Daemon and Rhaenyra had their creepy incest uncle scene on the beach at Driftmark, they were actually just in Cornwall at St Michael's Mount. Dragonstone was allegedly filmed in Monsanto in Portugal, and Pentos was allegedly La Calahorra, Granada in Spain. We will find out later in this episode that Daemon's daughters are going to end up married to Rhaenyra's sons. So Luke and Jace are going to marry Daemon's daughters, and what is this family tree now? So they were what? First cousins once removed, was that it? So Daemon's daughters will be, as of this marriage, both sisters and sister-in-laws. They aren't cousins to their proposed husbands because Leonor isn't actually the boy's father. So their mother isn't the sister of their husband's father. But they are first cousins once removed because the girl's father is still the boy's mother's uncle. And what have you done, George? It's not a good sign if I need a spreadsheet to work out the familial relations in your show. So the brothers are also brother-in-laws because they're marrying cousins. The brothers are now also cousin-in-laws. So I hope that's clear to you now, because I don't think it is to me. This would not be normal even in Norfolk. We jump back in and we have more politics. Corlys's brother, Vaemond, is conspiring with the Hightowers to take Driftmark for himself. Rhaenyra goes to see Rhaenys to get her support to keep her son as the heir to Driftmark instead of Vaemond, and she offers the marriages of her sons to Rhaenys' granddaughters in exchange for her support. Rhaenys refuses because she still thinks that Rhaenyra and Daemon killed her son, and they could just tell her that her son's alive. Would it really hurt that much? You're just going to leave her thinking that her only son is dead. The best reason I can think of was that if she knew, it would maybe invalidate Rhaenyra's marriage to Daemon. But in the story, Aegon the Conqueror had 2 wives. Is it a problem if Rhaenyra has 2 husbands? I have no idea. Either way, they just leave Laenor's parents thinking he's dead to just add more suffering to the misery pile that at this point is getting stacked up like Scrooge McDuck's money pit. So Daemon and Rhaenyra ask the king for help, and the king is in a sorry state. He's bedridden and covered in bandages. They ask him for help, but he's on strong pain relief and he's barely conscious. Otto Hightower is sitting on the throne in the king's stead, and he's going to give Driftmark to Vaemond in order to aid the Hightowers. As Rhaenyra goes up to make her case in front of Otto, in a surprise, the king enters the hall. He can barely walk, and Otto sheepishly leaves the king's throne as the king hobbles towards the throne, propped up on a walking stick. It's a powerful scene, but it's just so effing sad. For any of you that are blessed enough to have never seen this in elderly relatives, you're fortunate. It's heartbreaking to see people you love fade away. It's a dramatic scene, but it certainly doesn't make me happy. And as the king stumbles forward to try and get to the throne, he almost falls forward onto the field of swords surrounding the throne. Sensibly, all pointed upwards, and no, that never gets any less stupid. So as the king is hunched over, trying desperately to reach for the throne, his crown falls from his bowed head, and Daemon picks it up for him. And why does Daemon never age? The poor king is there, looking like a deadite, and Daemon still looks the same as in episode 1, apart from him not wearing the stupid effing dragon hat. Well, this is powerful stuff, and there's some nice symbolism, but it's just so sad. The king takes the throne and is angry that Driftmark is even an issue again. It was supposed to be settled. It would go to Lucerys, but scheming has happened behind his back. He asks for Rhaenys to speak, and she says the husband's position was for Luke to inherit Driftmark. She has decided, after all, to back Rhaenyra in exchange for the marriages. Daemon, though, is angry, and he will not accept it. He accuses the king of breaking tradition by naming a female heir. He says he will not see his house ended and passed to someone he's not even related to. He says that Rhaenyra's children are bastards and she's a whore. And why are people gasping? Everybody knows that's what the children are. They're clearly not Laenor's children. They're the wrong ethnicity to be Laenor's children. The king gets up, draws a knife and says, "I'll have your tongue for that." And that's when Daemon hits Vaemond in the head from behind with a sword like a coward. And why do they even let people into the throne room with swords? It's like asking for someone to kill the king. The king has organised a family meal and everyone hates each other. The king is carried in on a chair, and the king is hoping that the family meal will quash the infighting in his family, and realistically there's probably more chance of Laenor getting Rhaenyra pregnant than that happening. Before dinner, Alicent gives a prayer to the Seven and prays for the gods to give rest to Vaemond Valerion, and Matt Smith smirks. Why are people acting like this guy's a hero again? He's a backstabbing murderous psycho who married his own niece and murdered his innocent wife. So the king is trying to calm things down between the two factions, and Alicent's son Aegon immediately starts being a tool, saying of the marriages, "Well done, Jace, you'll finally get to lie with a woman." Just why is he like this? Aside from being an insufferable douche, he's dumb as hell. Jace is ahead of him in the line of succession. The king is looking peaky at best, and when he pops it, Jace's mum is going to be ruling the Seven Kingdoms. One accident and Jace could be ruling. Is that just Aegon's character? Is it like Daemon being pathologically reckless? Is Aegon just a complete moron? The king tries again to mend the rift between the factions, taking his mask off so they can all see him as he is, and it's grim. He can barely stand and has lost an eye, and the CGI guys have done a pretty good job, but it's grim as hell again. He says, "I want you to see me as I am, not just your king, but your father, your husband, your brother, your grandsire, who may not, it seems, walk for much longer among you. Set aside your grievances, if not for the crown, then for this old man who loves you all dearly." And bravo, Paddy Considine. Good work, lad. After her father's plea, the Princess Rhaenyra tries to make amends. She toasts the Queen for standing honourably by her father. The Queen toasts her in return. They're trying, but sadly, the Queen's sons are twats. Aegon waits about half a second before proposing sex with... Oh God, what relation is Aegon to Daemon's daughters? No, I'm not doing it now. It's giving me a headache. And it seems the king's plea may have worked. Luke makes a toast, and he tries toasting the health of his uncles, The music starts and the people there seem to have fun. The king is carried out as he starts to feel bad. Rhaenyra's son Jace is smirking and giggling at Aemond, the man whose eye he destroyed with a knife, so now her sons are being dicks as well. And then Aemond stands up to make a toast to the health of his nephews, each one of them handsome, wise and strong, and he's clearly alluding to their alleged real father, Harwin Strong, so a massive brawl breaks out. The young men's fight is broken up by their parents, and there is some great acting from Matt Smith as he sends Rhaenyra's kids away and turns to size Aemond up. Sighing. And these two seem to speak the same language. The look on Matt Smith's face is a magical piece of acting. He sighs deeply, and there are notes of disappointment, then anger, amusement, and in a way he also looks happy. He almost looks proud of Aemond. It's as if he sees a kindred spirit in him and a worthy opponent all wrapped in one, and all this in a few seconds of acting with no dialogue at all. And this may be the best acting I've ever seen from him. Bravo, Matt Smith. Good work, lad. It's nice to see the English lads bossing it. Alicent and Rhaenyra are trying to honour the king's wishes, but it's too late. The way they've raised their sons has set their families on a collision course. The king is in bed ill, and he's visited by Alicent. The king is confused and dying, talking about Aegon the Conqueror's vision, and Alicent misunderstands what he's talking about. She thinks he wants their son Aegon to take the throne, and that one misunderstanding will lead to tragedy.
Could you make me a cup of tea, please, Stephanie?